So in this section, we're going to be taking a look at how we can add our tertiary detail, our secondary detail. And the thing that I'm going to be focusing on right now is taking a look throughout the model and looking for opportunities to continue out and look for wrinkle patterns, places on the model where I think there's going to be a lot of movement and maybe skin folds, things like that. And so I'll try to get all that completely and totally wrapped up. I think there's some stuff that I want to do to maybe the kneecaps and the back of the arms and the elbow areas in there. And then I've already got some of these lines kind of laid out in the wrist and some other areas, but I just need to go through the rest of the model and really start to tighten everything up and sure everything up in this section. So the main tool that I'm going to be using at this point for everything is the Damien Standard tool. And remember, we can always hold down Alt and then click on one of these subtools to just select it and start working with it. And if I've got it on the Damien Standard tool, let's see, maybe I can come down to the knee because this is just not so well detailed out currently right now. So I'm probably going to run through with a thickness about something like this because I want this to read from about this distance, and I think that depth on there kind of reads pretty well. So you can see if I tap S, the draw size that I currently have is 71, and if I tap U for my Z intensity, I got a Z intensity of 33. And obviously I'm using a Wacom tablet, and so I got pressure sensitivity. I'm not really pushing too hard on this, so I'm able to control the depth pretty well on this. And so I'd like to kind of come through, and maybe it's a little bit lighter and through here. And then the areas where we have high compression and tension, we're going to get the biggest kind of wrinkle patterns in through there. Sometimes the ZBrush does that. I'm just going to hit undo. I'm not really sure what's going on with that, why it does that crazy straight line thing. It's been doing that for a long time in the program, so if you ever see that, I don't know if it's actually ZBrush itself or it's something to do with the way that it reads the tablet pressure. It's kind of annoying, but I just always just say, oh, well, hit the undo button and go from there. So hopefully you can see something like that. I think is going to be pretty good for this section. Now, I might not do this too much, but I could start running some cracks in through this way and start building some patterns of, scales and things like that. So I don't know how much exactly of this that I'm going to do at this stage, because there's another part that I want to show you that is, we're going to make our own kind of brush and create our brush from that. And the other part that I want to show you is the ability for us to potentially take model data and then insert that into the mesh and then kind of use that as scales. So I'll go back to the back part of the arm, and if we go to B and then I for insert, we've got insert mesh primitives, and I'll just do a sphere like this, and I'll click and drag this out like this, and I can immediately put it on the gizmo tool, and I can scale this this down. I need to, looks like I have symmetry on, and I want to make sure that it's scaling the right way. I'm going to hold down Alt and click on the go to unmask points, and it looks like I need to turn on this local sim right here to get this to scale the way that I want. I want to just treat this as if it's like scaling this one object like this. So what I'm going to do is kind of flatten this out, and this really all depends on for the type of scales or things like that that you might be making. You might not actually need something like this, but I was just going to show you if you're doing something like a snake or this turtle, we do have this possibility of taking actual geometry, and we can manipulate this one piece, and maybe we got something like this, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do is just take this, put on the move tool, hold down control, and then drag, and it'll drag out a copy. And then I can push this thing over like this. It's going to mask everything else out except for this one part while we're still in this insert mode. Now I can take the move brush, and this will be rather time consuming, but you can get really nice results this way, where I'm going to take actual geometry, hold down Control again, scale this down, move it within here like this, and I'll hold down Control, drag out another copy, pull this out, kind of like this. And then I'll pull this out here, and I'll keep manipulating this, holding down Control. This process it's pretty slow and pretty tedious, but it can give you really nice results because you're actually using real geometry to populate this stuff with. So I'm going to rotate this one, make it a bit larger, like this, hold down Control, and drag out this part, like that. And then I'll let go and then remask, let go of the mask and then remesh. So I'm going to hit undo real quick. So you can see now I'm at this point where I do know that I need to step up in resolution. Like I'm getting a lot of faceting in through here. And on the back, you know, when we remesh and do the Dynamesh, it's killing a lot of that detail. So the only way I can get that detail to stay is we need to start moving up in subdivision levels, and I think it's appropriate, the level that I'm at kind of right now, to go ahead and move that up. So I was at 128, so I'm going to try 300 and then just remesh and kind of see what I get. And I think that's pretty good. I probably want to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go 500 and then remesh. And I think that's looking pretty good. From this distance, I don't see too much of this. I know that there's you know, it's joining these things together, and I can lightly kind of smooth this out. So I can even get in here pretty tightly and take a look, and it's pretty decent. Now the rest of the model, if I want, I want to be careful with this. So I'm gonna store a morph target real quick, and then I'm gonna hit clay polish, and it'll take some of this faceting that you see on here and maybe tighten it up just a little bit. And so if I switch between my morph targets, you can see there's a slight difference. So that wasn't too bad. The reason I was kind of saving that off is what I was going to do is I'll do clay polish a couple times like this, and then let go. And then now if I hit switch, you can see there's a pretty big difference. If I didn't like how much that difference is, so I put it on the latest one with a lot of clay polish, I could take the morph slider and then drag it to the right, and then that's going to push it towards whatever I was at before. So basically this becomes like a slider for intensity. So this is 100% at 0, and then if I slide it this way, it reduces the effect a little bit. So I can kind of find some kind of sweet spot for that. And so I think that that works pretty good for this part. I think the next thing that I would like to show you that we could potentially use for this process is making our own brush. So before I do this, I'm gonna save this file real quick. And I've got a stored camera. We've already talked about that before. If I go to File, Save As, and then I've got this this version that I'm making here, secondary details like this, and I'll just save that off because I'm going to do quite a bit of work to change the canvas. Because I'm going to make a brush, I don't want the canvas to be in this large size that I have. So we've talked about in the past with the metal project how to change our canvas size and everything. So I'm going to turn the proportion off for this, and I'll put this at 1024 by 1024 like that. I'll just resize it. I'll just say yes for this, hit Control N to clear out the canvas, So again, that's under layer, and you can do clear. That's the hotkey that we're doing for this. And now at this point, I need a polymesh 3D that is a plane, and I'm going to check this out. I'm going to hit the comma key and take a look at some of the tools that they have. I think they have a flat plane already set up for us. So I think they have this thick plane ZTL, and I can double click that and it'll load it. And I can click and drag this out. Let's see what this looks like. That's going to give me the right kind of geometry. Actually, it's not. So let's go back here. So actually what I'm looking for is it exists under project and under miscellaneous. They do have a thing to generate 3D brushes. Now, if I load this as a project, it tries to load this as a project within here. So that's not exactly what I want. So I'll show you how to make this. I just wanted to try to avoid making some new geometry. I'm going to delete this thing out real quick. So sorry about that. I know that's a little bit annoying, but let me get this geometry out of here. So I'm just selecting it, getting rid of it, and I'll delete all from this and get this out of here. So it's not bad for you probably to know how to do a little bit of scene cleanup, so no big deal there. So I'll do a plane 3D, and I'll go to the initialize, and I'll make sure the divide is set to 10 by 10. Actually, it will only let me go higher, so maybe do 50 by 50, like that. And then I will go ahead and click the Make Polymesh 3D, because if you remember from these earlier sections, we talked about having instances and that we need to create the instance over until an actual sculptable piece of geometry. So I'll hit that. And then from there, I'm going to tap P, and I want to make a poly group to make this real easy to clean up the outer parts of this. So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and then, Control and Shift and drag in the viewport, add the spacebar modifier, and then try to select everything within this area like this. And now I'll just hit Control W to make a new poly group, and I'll hold down Control Shift and then click to move that out. Now if I've got perspective turned off, and I rotate my camera and hold down Shift and snap it, if I tap F, it'll frame all the way into the document. And that's pretty important for us later whenever we go to grab the depth information from this. So basically we're going to make a brush, turn it into depth information, and that'll be good for what we're trying to do. So what I want to do is add subdivision levels to this, and I want to turn off this smooth mesh modifier, subdivide smooth modifier. And when I do that, it'll make sure it keeps the corners nice and straight. Something else that we can do is go to crease, and if we creased this, which you can see it's already got creasing on the outer edge of this, when we go and hit Control D to divide this thing, it will not round out the corners. Now let's take a look. If I was going to put on this SMT, I hit Control D, and it will round out the corners just a little bit, but because we have creasing on there, it's going to hold these edges pretty well for us. So I'm going to hit Control D maybe to get maybe 5 divisions, something in there. So we'll tap F for that and just frame in like this. And then now I can do some sculpting. So I can put this on the Damien standard. And if you think about that knee pattern thing that I had going on there, I could do something like this. And I'm going to make it somewhat kind of circular as far as the where we're going to keep the detail, because I'm going to use this as a stamp, and we're going to drag this thing out. So again, I can kind of come up and through here, maybe do this just a little bit. And if I take this lazy step down a little bit more, I can get less spacing. You see there's a little bit of spacing in between some of this stuff. So this almost feels like a brick wall for a pattern, but we want to try to make this a bit more organic. I'm going to tap U and drop my intensity just a little bit. Then maybe I want to do some shapes like this every now and then. keep coming in here. And I'll put one line there. And I think that's going to be pretty good for that. I'll pull up and through here like this. Like that. And I'll do a line here. Maybe a line like this and through here. And let's go maybe here. And I'll just take the clay polish and I will polish this up just a little bit. I kind of, instead of letting this be pillowy, I keep going and dragging off of here thinking it's canvas. So if I go here, I'm just trying to release the mask holding down control in here. So I know my background is like really close to this color here. It's just hard to see. If I use trim dynamic, I could kind of push down on these just a little bit. So I know I'm spending a little bit of time on this pattern, but I think it's well worth our effort to spend the right amount of time on these, because this becomes a stamp that you're going to use over and over again. So if you kind of have poor quality on this sculpt, you're just basically reduplicating this poor quality that you've made all over the entire model. So you definitely want it to read well and have a nice look to it. So that's why I'm just spending a little bit of time on this and kind of getting this to look a little nicer. Now you might want it to be kind of pillowy like that. That's completely fine. But I wanted a little bit of these sharper edges to kind of pop up and show up and through there. And I'll click clay polish one more time for this. So I'll tap F. Now if I don't want these corners on here, if I haven't done anything to this, I can, remember we made the poly group, I can hold down Control and Shift and select it, and then I'll hold down Control and then click to mask this. I'll hold down Control Shift to bring everything back, and then I can invert my mask by hitting Control I. I can smooth my mask by holding down Control and clicking on it. And then within the deformation area, they've got this morph to grid, and if I do that, you can see how it's going to conform these outer corners. It's if this was kind of messed up within here, so if I just move this in here like that, if I do this morph to grid, you can see how it conforms the geometry and tries to fix that back up. So we can do this part that we're going to do here. So I'm going to hold down Control, remesh in there. It's really hard for me to remember that I'm not looking at the canvas for there. So just releasing the mask, and let's see here. We got, I must have done a accidental thing here whenever we did this. I think I had the masking on from the clay polish potentially. So let's do this again. Let's mask this part. Control Shift, click in here to bring everything back. Control click in the open viewport to invert the mask, and then we can hold down Control to smooth this out. And then I'm just going to use this morph to grid. Okay, now it's holding all that, and we're not getting any kind of weirdness in there. Okay, now I can tap F, and you can see how it's filled up the canvas nicely for us. I'm going to put it on the standard brush, and I know I'm going to make my own brush. So ZBrush has got this thing, if we start to alter it, it can take over the standard brush, and that'll become the standard brush for this session. I don't want that. I want to make a new brush, so I'm going to go brush clone, and you can see it's going to make this standard _1 like that. Now at this point I'm going to use a drag rectangle for my stroke type, and we'll see that in just a second. And then in alpha I'm going to go click grab doc, and it'll grab the document, the depth from the document. And so now I can click and I can drag this out as if it's a brush, right? So that's really nice. Now with the history, I can just step back on this before I started drawing anything if we want to just have a flat plane to kind of test this out on. So you can see what this looks like here. And I think I'm pretty good with that. I just maybe not super happy about how it makes kind of a bulge on here. So I'm going to go to the alpha and check out the alpha on this. And I want to go to modify and mid value. Let's put this at 50 and see what that effect does. Let's go to 100. And I think that's a little better. Also, this focal shift, if we put that at negative 100, I think that'll work pretty good. Let's put this mid value back at 50. That's not giving me what I want. Okay, so I kind of like that, but maybe the focal shift back it off just a little bit. Something like that. And I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so I want to save this brush. I'm going to save it. And I always try to save anytime I make new brushes and materials and stuff like that. What I'm doing, I'm going to a folder that I have. I keep all the different brushes that I've found, that I've made, and other people have made. It just makes it pretty easy for that. So I think this is, I call this Organics and Skin. So this will be, I'll call this Turtle Skin 1. Something like that. So now we can always get back to this. We've already talked in previous sessions about how to use Lightbox. Go to brushes and then go to make a shortcut, and you can get to the brushes that you've made. That was insert mesh brushes. So standard brushes, and then I did organic and skin, and then the new one that I just made should be on here. Within here, this one right here. So I'll be able to load that up in other sessions. So I'm going to go back to the document, and I'm going to go to change my size, 2560 by 1440. I'll resize it. I'll clear my canvas. Control N is the hotkey for that. And then this time, geometry wise, let's go select our character and then draw it back on screen. Hit T to go into edit mode. And so we've just moved out of those different modes. I'm going to put it on the perspective tool like this, and let's try out our brush. Initially, I'm going to guess that this is probably pretty strong. So if I drag this out on here, yeah, that's probably way too intense for what I'm hoping for. So I'll tap U and then drop back the intensity, and I'm hoping to get just a little bit of this pattern that's kind of on here. So as I add this to the skin, I'll let the computer do a good bit of work. And then after I've drawn this out, I will go back with, let's say like the Damien standard, and I'm going to drop my intensity down. And then what I need to do is incorporate what I'm seeing with what that stamp has given me, and then hand draw into it like this. And so I let the computer do a good bit of work, but then I need to always kind of alter this and change it up just a little bit, maybe add some intensity here and there. So I'm just raising some of these corners up on these parts, maybe digging in. So I'm just not gonna just let the computer just give me all the information and just call it a day. I'll add some artistic elements to it to hide the fact that I'm using these stamps all over. Because if we don't do this work and we start stamping everywhere, it becomes pretty obvious that that's the technique that you're using. And people that do this kind of work for a living, they'll pick up on that, and it's just not the best way to kind of detail something out. So yeah, it's gonna be a combination of working with these patterns that you make and then adding to that and adding complexity and making sure everything kind of reads. So you can see that there's a line here, and as I've added this medium level detail and I step back, I still want that to read really well, so I might have to re-emphasize some of this in the sculpt to get that to read correctly from a distance. So as you start adding this medium level detail, some of this detail that you've already put on here you may have to go back through, and you may have to tighten some of this stuff up, and you might have to reinforce it just because it becomes less powerful looking next to something that's got this heavy pattern to it. So I'll go back to this one. Let's see here if I drop this back a little bit and pump up the intensity of this just a little bit. And I don't think I want that on the chest area. I want that to feel a bit more soft, and so maybe this feels a bit more plated up and through here. And I'm not going to be able to really get to these things to turn, but with the drag rectangle stroke type, you can see I can control the scale and I can rotate this thing a bit. So if I drag out one here and then rotate this one at this angle, I can kind of make them feel like they join together somewhat. And then I can start to do this process that we were just talking about, where maybe I've got to clean some of this up, and maybe I've got to do some additional line work on areas, and I got to start to tie this stuff together. So it's definitely a little bit of work, but I think it's pretty cool for this stage to see everything start to come together. Now, if you've got a good foundation, then this detail work that you're doing, if you're tasteful with it and you're respectful with it, then it ends up just adding on top of the primary details that we've added, and it just starts to make the whole sculpt feel that much stronger, right? And then if we get this stage done really well, then we can move on to the tertiary detail stage, and that's where everything kind of just starts to harmonize with each other for these different levels of detail that we work with. Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do next is you've seen the techniques. Now it's just a matter of working on this and making judgment calls, and then trying to res this thing up, make good choices about depth information and things like that. So now the work is just finishing this up from a leveling up kind of standpoint. And so I think I will do that. I will call it for this particular stage right here for showing off the techniques, and I will I'll put it in a time-lapse mode and then keep working from there, from that point on.